Good evening, everybody, or depending on what part of the world you're in, good morning. I happen to be in Wisconsin right now. I'm born and raised in Green Bay, and I live just outside the city right now. So I'm in Central Time, which is also known as Chicago time around the world. And we have many people in the audience tonight who are from around the world. This is a global broadcast live, real time on YouTube. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. The subject of tonight's discussion is something that is rather serious and something that there has to be much more knowledge and awareness of on your part and your loved ones and friends and people that you know. I'll ask a simple question to begin, and that is, do you or do you know anybody who has high blood pressure or diabetes or any other heart type concern? Because if they do, this presentation from me hopefully will help. My name is Scott Pribyl, Pribyl, and I'm here on behalf of aortichope.org, aortichope.org, and an organization called Think Aorta US. So Think Aorta US is the umbrella or parent organization, if you will, and Hope aortichope.org is part of the Think Aorta umbrella or concept. My story tonight is one of surviving what is known as an aortic dissection. Some people know what that is. I was first introduced to the term aortic dissection when John Ritter, the famous actor and great comedian, passed away in 2003 from that particular disease. And unfortunately, he is like most people that incur an aortic dissection in that he only survived a couple of hours. And ironically, his dissection occurred during the middle of the day in the Los Angeles area, where there was probably the premier medical facilities available to him, but he had an improper diagnosis, and unfortunately, he passed away. It didn't have to be that way for him. I survived. It doesn't have to be a death matter for you either, or something that's going to really impair your life. My situation is unique, as are all stories, and mine is simply this. I was born January 24th, 1955 in Green Bay, Wisconsin at St. Vincent Hospital. Some of you may know of that. And if we can move forward, I graduated from college getting a bachelor's degree in business and marketing from the University of Wisconsin, Green Bay, graduated in 1978. And then I got a master's degree in marketing from the Management Institute of the University of Wisconsin in Madison, Wisconsin, later. Through my career, I have worked hard. I've been a workaholic at times, had some good habits and some bad habits. What I would ask you to do tonight is to please have a pen and a pad of paper handy, or if you have a cell phone and you choose that to take your notes, please do that and keep that handy. Write your notes down, because as we go through the session and toward the end of it, which will be 20 to 30 minutes of my presentation, you'll be allowed to ask any questions you might have or ask for clarification if that will help you. So again, I want to thank you on behalf of aortichope.org and Think Aorta US for being here, and I hope that we can provide you with some good information that will help you, your loved ones, your friends, literally anybody you know. And the reason I stress that is simply this. I incurred my dissection January 27th, 3 days after my 53rd birthday in 2008. At 10:30 at night, I went to the restroom, was getting ready to go to bed, had an intense pain all of a sudden in my jaw, and realized something was wrong. January 27th. On the 25th, the day after my birthday, I ran 5 miles, which I normally did every Friday. Felt fine. Sunday morning, the 27th, my wife and I went for a walk in a part of Green Bay known as Astor Park, one of John Jacob Astor's real estate ventures. He was part of the Titanic, which most of you probably know. And little did we know that we would wind back up in that same area of Green Bay at about 2 o'clock in the morning on January 28th, as I was getting prepared for emergency aortic dissection surgery and repair, which obviously I survived. I survived where Mr. Ritter did not. And there are some other people that you may be familiar with who have had aortic dissection or related aortic illnesses that have passed away. I can think of Lucille Ball. I can think of Mr. Ritter, obviously, and I can also think of Bill Paxton and Alan Thicke. And even, I mentioned Lucille Ball, but Albert Einstein had an aortic dissection that caused his death. These things didn't have to happen. They don't have to happen today. The awareness is what we have to stress. So the group of people that I'm addressing tonight, we're the group of people that are going to form the grassroots movement to get aortic dissection into the mainstream, of the public view and the public knowledge, to have it be top of mind rather than suppressed. The reason I say that, I've talked to so many people over the last 15 years, many of which I've known for a long time. And I mention that I had this happen to me, or they will ask, and 95% of them can't tell me what an aortic dissection is. But 5% will tell me, oh yeah, my grandfather had that, or my grandmother, my aunt, my uncle, a friend, some relation. So 95% of the people that I talk to just casually have no idea what it is. And when I try to explain it to them, it's deer in the headlights. It's not their fault. There is not enough awareness. And please write this down. There is not enough awareness of aortic dissection and the devastation that it can cause to the human body, ultimately resulting in death over 95% of the time. In my particular case, happening at 2 o'clock in the morning, emergency surgery at a hospital that I was born in, ironically, 53 years and 3 days before, I was brought back to life. That's a true story. That did happen. The prominence of aortic dissections run throughout our community in big numbers. When I mentioned high blood pressure before, according to the American Heart Association, approximately 33%, maybe 50 million, maybe 75 million people just in the United States are going to suffer from high blood pressure at some part of their life. And that is what caused my aorta to dissect. I was a weightlifter, became a power lifter. I put on 65 to 70 pounds of extra weight, which I would like to think was muscle. However, my heart didn't want that weight. And my heart didn't care if that weight was fat or muscle. It was too much. So I had high blood pressure diagnosed at the age of 27, and my aorta dissected at age 53. Today I'm 68. The odds of me surviving at 2 o'clock in the morning under the circumstances under which I was in are about 1% survival. And to be able to do those things, which I'm still able to do, which is a very small fraction of what I used to do, I've been very fortunate compared to most people, because most die or they have a lot of debilitating problems that accompany aortic dissection. It's that bad. For the first year and a half that I lived with this aortic dissection injury, because I really kind of caused it myself by virtue of the high blood pressure. I didn't need to bench press, 410 pounds, but I got myself big enough and strong enough without the use of steroids or anything artificial to do that. It was a major accomplishment in my view. However, I caused my own aortic dissection, unknowingly, not intentionally, but that's what happened. So the human ego is something that we have to keep our eyes on. And I'm reminded of that particular phrase from a gentleman in 2009, about a year and a half later. His name is John Jones, and he was the president of the Green Bay Packers. He dissected about 18 months before I did. He was about a year older than I was at the time. I was 53, I believe he was 54. And it's a long story, which I won't get into how we met, but he had written had a website, I should say, that was called bulletproofmyth.com. Bulletproofmyth.com. It's no longer operational, but his point is very simple, that we're not bulletproof. Men in particular, but women just as much. And especially if you're a type A person, or if you have contributing factors that might lead to an aortic dissection, such as heart disease, or high blood pressure, or stroke history, or your family has some kind of familial tie to some type of a malady that is going to impact your heart, you're at high risk for an aortic dissection. And yet, it is something that can be very, very easily diagnosed well ahead of that, much sooner than I went through. You don't have to find out at 10:30 at night and then have a 2 o'clock surgery. It's not necessary. So at any rate, in meeting John, he explained some things to me that I didn't know, and we became friends very quickly. We've had lunch several times and dinner, and went out to coffee a few times, and a very gracious man. In my area, if a person, a man in particular, was to aspire in a career sense to be somebody of note or have a particular career path they really enjoyed, to be the president of the Green Bay Packers was probably the most desirable position a person could have, and that's the position he had. So for him to befriend me, and I did not know him before, but I remembered the announcement when he was in the hospital having open heart surgery on the radio sports program I used to listen to, was a little bit overwhelming. But he was very gracious, and he walked me through what the cardiothoracic surgeon I had did, who was a marvelous doctor. In fact, when he explained to me the day I was discharged, I spent 4 days in intensive care, 4 days in intermediate care. I didn't spend 1 day in a regular hospital room. They sent me home. He did. And if you remember the old paper towels, brown paper towel where we had a little white handle, or a white container, I should say, with a circular handle, he proceeded, when I asked him what he had done, to pull off a nice foot-long section of that paper towel, and he took a pen and he sketched what he did. And what he did is he replaced my aortic valve, which had burst, again at 10:30 at night, and I didn't do anything about it until really midnight. And in the process of that bursting, my ascending aorta, the aorta that goes up, or sends blood, I should say, up to the brain, it's above the heart, was replaced as well, and that was replaced with Dacron, which I believe is a 3M product. And what it is a hose, because I had obliterated my aorta, the ascending portion, as well. In addition to that, I also had what's called a type B dissection, that's in my abdomen, and there just simply wasn't time for that one to be repaired. And as a result of that, I've had to take a lot of medication for a lot of years to correct the wrongs that I was, in large part, the cause of, and that was just being overweight. Even though I thought I was carrying muscle, it's too much weight. If you put too much stress on the human body, it's going to give. Now, as we talk, I'm going to make some comments. I'm going to ask you to write this stuff down because it's important for you and those that you know, and I'm going to keep a watch on time. I want to try to get my portion done over the next 10 to 15 minutes and then open up the floor to questions or concerns or comments that you might have. And I've also made a few notes here to give you a little bit of information about myself. This video, by the way, is going to be archived on YouTube if you have a YouTube account, or again, go to aortichope.com and you can probably find the resource as you might have today. So it will be on YouTube in perpetuity, as long as YouTube is around. This particular video right now is there. I say that for this reason, and I want you to write this down. Let people know. Make them aware. Don't just take the information and pass it off. This is real stuff, and it happens far more often than the general public is aware. Far more often. And I mentioned high blood pressure. I mentioned diabetes. I mentioned stroke possibilities. There are other diseases or medical complications that can contribute to an aortic dissection. And it's important that you know this. You can't be like the 5% of the people that I'd mentioned before who had heard about it because someone in their circle had died. We want to turn those numbers exactly the opposite. We want 95% or better awareness. That is the key act. I'll make people aware. Send this video to whomever you need, to whoever you want. Send aortichope.org's website or Think Aorta US, those terms, to anybody you know on social media, in your friends list. Get it out there, because if you don't do it, it's not going to happen. And I'll guarantee you this, I don't know how many people are listening tonight, but since we're going worldwide, live, real time, my guess is we have tens of thousands of people who are listening to me speak right now. And I'll guarantee you that many of you and your close network of friends and family are going to run into an aortic dissection problem or the dissection itself, and far too many are going to die or suffer very serious consequences, typically dying within 2 to 3 hours. We can look at someone like John Lennon from the Beatles in 1980, 43 years ago. He was shot in the chest 5 times with a .32 caliber bullet. 4 of those bullets would not have killed him. The evidence is clear. The medical records are available on the internet. 1 of the bullets, just 1, .32 caliber is not a very large bullet, but it happened to pierce his aorta. And in the process of doing that, he bled out and he died. It was that simple. So this is not something to be taken lightly. If you have high blood pressure, if you have diabetes, if you have any concerns about stroke or any kind of a heart problem or issue of any nature, take these notes that you're writing down as we speak. Make an appointment tomorrow. Don't put it off to your next scheduled visit. Make the appointment tomorrow and get a hold of your internist or your cardiologist, nephrologist, endocrinologist, whoever you're having to see to monitor whatever health concerns you have, and talk to them at length about what we're discussing tonight. So this happened to me in 2008. In 2015, I wrote this book. The name Miracle Man is a name that was given to me by the nurses at St. Vincent Hospital, who I mentioned before, which is where I had my aortic dissection repaired. You can get that book off aortichope.org's website, or you can go to Amazon, or you can just plug in my name, Scott Pribyl, P as in Peter, R-I, B as in boy, Y-L, and then put in the words Miracle Man. Again, I didn't name myself that, the nurses did, because I was not expected to survive, but I did. And you'll find that book is available all over the world. It's in South Korea now, it's in India. I don't think it's in China or Russia at this point in time, nor Africa, but just about anywhere else it can be obtained. And I urge people to get the book for this reason. The story itself, I hope you'll find to be intriguing, interesting. It's a human, personalized story of a really tragic event that literally destroyed my life. At the age of 53, when this happened to me, 3 days after my 53rd birthday, I was very fortunate in that I had a job that was paying me quite well. I was a public speaker for a Fortune 500 company, and I had done a stint with IBM, which is one of the Dow Jones 30. stocks, and I had been a broker with Edward Jones. So I've had a lot of career experience. And in my last position, I have given public speeches to more than 9,000 people. So to talk to a computer screen about this tonight is very different, but to speak in general about any topic is something that I did for a living, and I was well paid for it the last 3 years that I worked for this Fortune 500 company. What it boils down to is there are physical problems that will happen if you don't take care of your heart and your aorta. Bank on it. One way or another, it will manifest. I hope you write down, make appointment tomorrow. Don't wait. Don't be a statistic. I was. My ego got the better of me when I was much younger. That's my fault. The doctors who were trying to treat me beginning in 1982 didn't do a real good job. In this book, there are also 4 pages of the surgical and medical records. Miracle Man. You can take that book, and if nothing else, just take the information from those 4 pages of the surgical and medical documentation, the actual records, and show those to the doctor of your choice. And ask that doctor to walk you through what these 4 pages are saying. Because the lexicon that the medical profession uses is often convoluted, hard to understand, but they understand it. But it's up to you to ask. It's up to you to show. And those pages and the story are in this book. So I ask you, please, for your sake, to do that. I wish that I could give this book to everybody. I wish I could. But there is no such thing as a publishing firm that will publish a book of any sort for nothing. If there was, that's what it would be. But the cost is minimal. It's comparable to a good glass of beer or a drink somewhere if you have that. That's it. But the information is that powerful, tells the full story. I can't tell it as well in this short time frame that we have, but the book is 30 or 40 minutes to read. But more importantly, again, if you take those 4 pages of the surgical and medical records, and I know I'm being repetitious, but I'm doing it for a reason, put those in front of your doctor and say, Mr. or Miss Doctor, please level with me and explain what happened to this man. Am I at risk? I have a parent, or I have a grandparent, or I have a relative, or I have a close friend who seems to have something going on with them that could be this aortic dissection. How can I help them? Can you explain that to me? Now, what doctor is going to say no? None. But unless you take the time to show them the information, they aren't going to know to ask. And most doctors, and I don't mean to be critical of the medical profession in any way, they have a lot of patients to see every single day. They don't have time to go through every possible consequence of any person's medical history or their daily activities. Time doesn't permit. The medical profession is in many ways like a business. They have to see X number of people to justify their own existence and to try to do as best as they can to stay current on topics like aortic dissection so that they can teach other people and share with their patients what they need to know. They just don't have time. You, on the other hand, write this down. You have the time because it's your life. It's your family member's life, your friend's life that you're talking about. There are some people in the organization that Karen Anderson, whose name I mentioned before, she's the president of aortichope.org, as well as Think Aorta US, that have been pregnant and had an aortic dissection at the same time. There are a couple people that I know of in the aortic world, so to speak, that have had cancer and an aortic dissection at the same time. And many of them survive. The vast majority don't. You have a couple of hours. That's it. So you have to make that decision. Is a piece of information such as this, or the many websites that are available through social media, all you have to do is search is for aortic dissection websites or Facebook pages or Instagram, uh, Twitter perhaps. There's so many ways you can get information. If you want my records, all you have to do is pick up that book for the cost of a drink, and now you have the records, and your doctor will explain what's going on, and they'll start looking at you different. Now, here's another word I want you to write down, and the word is echocardiogram. That simple ultrasound can be performed, which I have every single year, on your heart, and that alone can often serve as a glimpse for the doctor to see if there's been an enlargement of the aorta, beg your pardon. Especially true if a person has had high blood pressure for any length of time, or if they smoke, which is a terrible habit, it will contribute to your demise, or if a person is overweight. Combine all these elements together, and you've got the makings for a disaster. It happened to me, but I'm still here, and I'm talking about it, and I'm as emphatically as possible pleading with you. Talk to your doctor. Aortic dissection. Awareness is our job. Everybody on this presentation, webinar, call it what you will. We have to do that. You don't want to wind up like me having this occur at 10:30 at night on a Sunday evening when my wife and I are getting ready to go to bed, 2 days after I ran 5 miles, 3 days after my 53rd birthday, being carted off in an ambulance at 1 o'clock in the morning from one hospital to another where the surgery could be performed because it was pretty complicated, finding out later that the Red Cross had to have 25 pints of my blood sent to the hospital to save my life. And we happen to know that the notations on that order for the blood were, the outlook is very grim. Somehow I made it. By the grace of God, I'm here. There's no other way to explain it. Everything that had to happen for me to be here today did happen the night of January 27th and the morning of January 28th, 2008. That's what happened. This book, once again, Miracle Man, was written. The miracle happened to me. It didn't happen through me. It just happened to me. There's a difference. So in the process of trying to recuperate and to recover and rehab, some things became aware to me that I hadn't thought about before. One of them was the night this happened, before we were going to the hospital. This is about midnight on January 27th, 2008. My wife went downstairs. We had a 2-story home, and she started the car up to get it warm because in January, Wisconsin is kind of cold. And as she was doing that, I was sitting on our bed. It's a king-size bed, about 2 or 3 feet all around me, and I had my hands, and I was sitting up, and I lost my equilibrium, which had never happened to me before. And it was the most eerie feeling I could ever imagine. There was no pain, but I had no concept of whether or not I was vertical, was I horizontal, or was I just floating around like a piece of amoeba in a petri dish? That's scary. That's scary. No pain other than the initial onset of the disease in my jaw, which lasted 45 minutes. I took a Tylenol. That's my pain pill of choice. I've never had any pain since. Most people aren't that fortunate. But most of us, like me, didn't know. John Ritter didn't know. Lucille Ball, I'm quite sure, didn't know. Albert Einstein didn't know. But you do know. You do know now. So again, write this down, make your appointment, and do it tomorrow for yourself, your loved ones, your spouse, significant other, child, grandchild, whomever. Do it, and do it now. It's that important, and it matters. So anyway, prior to this occurring to me, I had become a power lifter when I was 27. I was very good at the bench press and the deadlift. Those are my lifts that I was focused on. And once this happened and I was discharged, the cardiothoracic surgeon told me that my heavy weightlifting days were over. He didn't go into great detail about the dissection because he had a brown paper towel and a pen, which is kind of funny when you think about it. But that's what he did to me. Great guy, though. Yeah. But the point is, that was such a big part of my life outside of my work, which again was as a public speaker. But that's all gone. And it has been for 15 years. So I had to come up with a different alternative because he imposed a 50-pound weight limit as far as lifting weights was concerned. And I still wanted to exercise. And after 2 weeks from the onset of the injury, 8 days in the hospital, another week at home recovering, I wanted to get back in the gym. And I'm trying to imagine, how am I going to do that if I can only lift 50 pounds? I can't do a 410-pound bench press anymore. Those days are over. 50 pounds? That's it. That's right. That's it. Fortunately, I had two very good friends that I trained with every Monday for several years. And they taught me how to do a workout with 50 pounds, but with very, very heavy number-wise repetitions to build my body back. Because I looked like a shadow of myself when I looked at myself in the mirror. I just did not recognize who I was. So in the process, in 2017, now we're going 9 years from when the incident occurred, I wrote a second book, and this one is called Lose Weight, Get Fit, Easy for Men and Women. And again, it's the cost of a drink, really. And you can buy it on Amazon.com, which is the current publisher for both books. But any bookstore anywhere in the world, you can buy either book. And again, I reference these because they're informational. They're not novels. They're there to help you, to save your life, perhaps. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not being melodramatic. This is real stuff. It happens. But even if it does happen, I still look this way when I'm not wearing my suit and tie, of course. A little bit of humor. Why? Because I did what the doctors told me, and I just said, I'm not going to give up. I'm not ready to quit. But I've had at least 10,000 timeouts. Like every 4 or 5 days, I would wonder to myself, what in the world am I doing? Why am I still here? If death is inevitable, and aortic dissection is virtually inevitable, and my odds of surviving were like 1% at 2 o'clock in the morning in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and a guy like John Ritter has to lose his life in one of the hotbeds of medical knowledge in this country, what am I doing here? So I don't have the answers for all that, but maybe this is it. Because now, and over the last month or so, working with Karen Anderson from aortacope.org and Think Aorta US, I've become aware that maybe there was a purpose for all this happening. Maybe there's a reason. People were telling me that for 15 years, and I kept thinking, well, really, no one's let me in on it. Well, now I'm beginning to feel that again because I'm back on the speaking circuit, so to speak, even though I'm talking to a screen and I'm not talking to a large live audience of people. I'm still doing the same things I used to do. I'm conveying information. If, again, and I want to stress this, if there was a way that a book, which is the only way I know to teach people how to get in shape, especially after a traumatic injury, or how to survive the injury at all, if there's a way to do that for nothing, I would do that. But I have not found one publisher who's willing to do that. They have a nominal charge, but they're worth their weight. I wish I had had these books when I was 27 and first diagnosed with high blood pressure, because I would have changed my life completely. I would have gotten rid of the weight. I would have worked on being physically fit rather than being a 410-pound bench press monster. Who cares? Was doing that worth forfeiting my life virtually? No. It was pretty stupid. My doctors, in their defense, I worked with at that time, 1982 until 2008. Frankly, I don't think really knew how to deal with a person with my blood pressure. It took a nephrologist, a kidney specialist, to work with me at the cardiothoracic surgeon's advice to bring my blood pressure down from 140 to 150 over 90 to 100 consistently and sometimes more. It was brought down to 98 over 54 with a pulse of 42 to 46, and it stayed there for 8 years. That's the good news. Took my heart out of trouble, took my aorta out of trouble. I still have a residual dissection in my abdomen of my aorta. That's been normal and unchanged for 15 years. But I take a lot of medication for that to happen. You don't want to live with the side effects of the medication. They're not pleasant. Fatigue becomes your friend. Only it's not my friend because I'm not used to being that way. I'm a type A person. I'm active. I would like to think that I was a very vital person, and this has reduced me to something other. And I don't like it. But if I can share it with you, as I mentioned before, this gives me personally a sense of purpose. Maybe there's a reason that this happened to me. And if it did, I can share it with you. And if you can relate to this, as many people out there that are listening, you can share it with others. And you have an obligation. And I hope you're compelled to share aortic dissection, my name, my books, aortichope.org, Think Aorta US. Share it with everybody you know. Because doctors are just overwhelmed. And the awareness factor for this type of illness, which we believe happens far more than it is given credit for. When I said before, the American Heart Association tells us that 33% of the population will have to deal with high blood pressure during the course of their lives. What is not said, but should be by implication, that people who are diabetic or have had strokes or anything regarding their heart or their cardiovascular system, now that number is getting probably 45 to 50% of the population. In the United States alone, again, that's 50 to 75 to 100 million adults, maybe even more. And it's so easy to find and to identify a potential problem with something perhaps as simple as an echocardiogram. Or you can get a CAT scan with contrast radiation, which I get every 2 years now, and everything's fine. But look at the sequence of events that had to happen before I got to this part. So I assure you, you don't want this. It's not desirable. Set your ego aside, get your notepad, your pen and paper, make that appointment tomorrow. Don't wait till your next scheduled appointment. Echocardiograms, CAT scans, get it looked at. We must, absolutely must, increase the awareness rate. So again, rather than 5%, as I mentioned before, being aware, we want 95% or more to be aware. And the only way you're going to get that number achieved, we as a group, is if we talk to our doctors. And just words sometimes are not enough. So if you take these and you use these as tools for your health, for information for your health, doctors are going to listen. And more importantly, they're going to pass that information on to their patients. And the more patients that they talk to and interact with, and the more public speaking events like this and in person that we do, and there are many planned, I'll be doing a couple in the near future as I understand it, we can make an impact. We can make a difference. John Ritter didn't have to die. No reason for it. If I can survive this disease at 2 o'clock in the morning in little Green Bay, Wisconsin, in the middle of winter, how come he can't survive at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in Santa Monica when he's got a better medical staff? I just got lucky, as simple as that. What I did not say, and I'm going to mention this, and then I'm going to stop and let you answer any questions or ask for clarification, whatever you wish, is at age 53, I was making about $170,000 a year. In Green Bay, that's a pretty good lifestyle, and I had 5 weeks of paid vacation every year, plus a very generous 401k. For every 6% that I contributed, my company gave 7. I've never heard of such a thing, but it was tremendous. I was planning to retire at 62, 9 years later, almost to the day, 3 days away. And in that period of time, the amount of income, had I no increase, it stayed static at 170,000 per year. And my 401k was 13% of my gross income plus whatever appreciation. And we all know what the markets did after 2009. They went soaring. That's over $2 million. I'm 68 years old. Retirement is nothing but a fantasy for me. It doesn't have to be that way for you. If for no other reason, your health is certainly paramount, but from a financial standpoint, if you want to continue to stay active, and if you're still working, and you want to have the nest egg you have ready for your retirement, you better make that appointment tomorrow. Don't wait. I did. Look what happened. Not a pretty picture. So if I am doing anything effectively, I am giving you information that you can use, that you can share. I am hopefully creating awareness about the aorta and other complications thereof that could very well happen to you, and they are severely underdiagnosed. People can have these problems, but we don't hear about them, but they're still there. So if you don't ask, you're not going to find out. Your loved ones are not going to find out. There's no reason for that to happen. Tomorrow, again, make the call, set the appointment, get the information, ask your doctor to walk you through it. It's that simple. They know it, but they need you to ask it. Maybe some of you have had the same reaction and response that I have. When I talk with doctors about anything, they know their craft, they know the science behind medicine, but they're not real good communicators, and they certainly aren't marketers. You have to ask. And we've been taught, at least in my lifetime, that whatever the doctor says is best. I don't think so. I think sometimes the patient has to get more involved, especially as we age, and we have some of these common maladies like diabetes and high blood pressure and stroke potential and on and on. There's so many that can impact your aorta. But without your aorta, I'll use one simple analogy and then I'm going to close. Most of us, I'm 68, if you're over the age of 40, I would think, hopefully everybody in this audience will know that if you have an automobile and it has a radiator hose hooked up to the engine, which a thermostat will control the heat of that engine or the coolness of the engine, if for some reason that engine is running too hot or too cold, that radiator hose, which I liken to the human aorta in a very simplistic sense, it really is that simple. That hose is going to expand due to the extra pressure, like high blood pressure, like what happened to me. When that happens, the hose, the aorta, can enlarge, they will not contract. Anyone who's ever changed a radiator hose knows exactly what I mean. You have to get a new one. I have a new one. My thermostat is my aortic valve. It's made out of carbon steel. It's not natural tissue. I take a drug called warfarin, or Coumadin as it's properly known, and I will for the rest of my life. This is not fun to deal with or live with. But I do appreciate the chance to talk to you about it, share, and with that, if I could give this back to Josh, who is the IT guru and resident expert on all things internet. Josh, if you could field any questions, I'd be happy to stick around for a while.
Right on. Thank you very much for that, Scott. Right away, we're going to say hi to some of our good friends. Velda, she showed up. We have somebody new. FJ Martin Latif says good morning. We said good morning, and then she said, oops, good evening. We were like, good evening. Awareness is definitely lacking, and as a survivor, we don't look like what we're going through. And so I think that's definitely something that you can touch up on, the invisible uh, situation where you're disabled, but nobody would know it looking at you.
No, it took a long time to recover from that. Josh, when I first looked at myself when I was discharged, I waited a day or two when I got home. I was gone and out of the hospital within 8 days. I did not recognize who I was. My face had no form. And now that it's 15 years, you have some of that naturally where your skin gets a little bit saggy and so forth. But I looked, in my face at least, worse than it does now. And that was a long, long time ago. Long time ago. So I noticed that first and foremost. And then when I looked at parts of my body, they looked relatively the same, except that I had this enormous scar down my chest, which I didn't like. And I didn't like the fact that they had to cut my pectoral muscles in a way that I was not able to repair and rebuild to the degree I had hoped to, or they once were. That has since gotten better, but is it the same? No. It's devastating.
Yeah, yeah, I get that. All right. Valerie jumped in to say hi. Molly Thomas jumped in to say hi. Ryan jumped in to say hi. He says hi to everybody. Hi, Ryan. We're glad you guys are here. Rob Seltzer jumped in to say hi. Let's see. Elk says, first time here. Sorry I'm late. And I had to remind Elk that she was with us for week in review the other day. And we're happy she's back. She says, thank you. Let's see. Over here we have a comment. Valerie says, she's talking into the chat. We had a mindfulness seminar earlier this year that she was part of, and she was saying hi to all of her mindfulness people. Let's see here. Rob says, get tested and have your family tested. Hashtag think aorta, think family. That's definitely
Thank you,
something.
Rob.
Yeah, that's
Thank you,
definitely
Rob.
something we're up to. Yeah. Thank you, Rob. He says, say aloud.
Yeah.
See here. Molly Thomas says, thank you, Mr. Pribyl. I said, yeah, powerful
Well,
testimony
thank
tonight.
you. I'm not used to talking to a computer screen. I'm more used to swearing at a computer screen
Yeah,
when it doesn't work, but this is okay. It works.
it's different. It is. All right. So Elk here says, I also feel that there was a reason for this. She's mentioning how you felt like you were brought, like you were here for a reason. I also feel that there was a reason for this to happen to me. I'm sharing with all of my friends and tell them to check their blood pressure regularly. Don't ignore it like I did. We said
What's her name?
Elk Car.
Elk?
Elk Car. Elky Car?
Elcar?
Elk.
Elcar?
Yeah, go for it.
I hope I'm saying it right or close. Thank you. You're absolutely correct. You get it. You understand. I hope everybody does what you're going to do.
Right. FJ says, I'm still learning. Every day I feel like I'm learning something new. It's so much. I feel like every time I try to explain, I over explain it and they tune out. I don't know enough to sum it up. And I get it. You know, that elevator pitch, that's a tough one to come up with.
And I use that radiator hose analogy quite a bit. And people can relate to that because if you had cars in the 60s and 70s and 80s where you had to repair radiator hoses and they would
Hmm.
expand due to extremes of heat or cold, they get it. They see the hose, this big expansion in it. The aorta is exactly the same. It will get larger. It will not get smaller on its own. You got to have surgery, and that kind of surgery is life threatening if
Hmm.
you don't die before the surgery. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Sad, but true.
Yeah. Rob's got a question. I'm surprised you're able to lift up to 50 pounds. Is that because you were already right trained?
I really couldn't answer that. The cardiothoracic surgeon that who did the operation, an incredible doctor, he just said, I want you to keep it under 50 pounds. Other than that, live your life normally. And that's what I chose to do. And I was originally told also by my cardiologist, don't travel because of that residual dissection of my abdomen, which is still there. There was not time to do the operation. I don't know how many people know this, and this is kind of a long winded answer, But when an aortic dissection or open heart surgery is performed, a sternotomy, which is opening the chest and spreading it apart, has to be done. The heart has to be stopped, and then it has to be hooked up to a cardiopulmonary machine, which is cardio, heart, pulmonary, oxygen, lungs, to make your body still function. But is it natural functioning? Not at all. There's only a 30-minute window when your body temperature gets down to 60 degrees that the surgery needs to be done and finished. And I had three things that needed to be done. My ascending aorta had to be replaced. The aortic valve had to be replaced with a prosthetic one, metal. And that took 26 minutes. I had 4 minutes left, and he just couldn't attack that lower residual dissection. So that's managed by meds. And that is very hard for me to live with because I'm not that kind of a sedentary person. I'm pretty active. I used to be anyway.
Oh, okay. Well, we have some clarification here. Elke says, just to clarify on how to pronounce my name, it's pronounced Elke, Elkie. It's spelled Elke. That's why there's a trip up there. She says, that's what I get for being born in Germany. Don't worry about mispronouncing it. It happens all the time.
I remember Elkie Summer, very popular actress back in the 60s.
So Rob here says, I've never spoken to anyone that's allowed to lift more than 10 pounds.
Well, I'm not a doctor and I don't want to give medical advice, and I'm not, other than get tested and talk to your doctor. Again, you've got to have the information in order to do that, and just show it to the doctor and say, doctor, please level with me. What can I do to prevent this, but also maybe to get my body back in the right kind of condition that I want it to be? It's so important to do that. And if you do that, if you ask the questions and if you have this information, they will level with you. They will tell you right away what you can and can't do. Being the type of person that I am, I chose to take 50 pounds and do what I could with it for about 2 years. And I got bored. And I decided then I was going to add a little more weight, 2.5 pounds at a time. And I did that slowly, very slowly. Today, as an example, prior to this session, I spent a short time in the gym. My workout's about 600 repetitions of 50 to now up to 120 pounds, which still is not very much compared to what I used to lift, but I get a good workout, keeps my heart in shape. My ejection refraction rate, which I have done on my echocardiogram every year, is 90%. And that's really high, and my cardiologist is very happy, which means 90% of my blood is leaving the heart or returning to the heart as it should be, where most people, it's 75%. So my heart is actually stronger. It's smaller, but it's in better shape.
Okay, that's interesting. That did spark some conversation here. I said that I thought that the weight variance was case by case because although I've heard of more than 10 pounds, I've heard of more than 10 pounds. And so Rob says, I get that, but I have not seen it yet. That's just my experience. And then Valerie says, my thoracic surgeon said nothing over 20 pounds and no holding the breath. And then Elke says, I can't do more than 20 pounds. I'm sure that different doctors have different answers.
Well, if you're going to lift lighter weights, then there are days where certain types of exercises with weights, I'll use 20 pounds. That's probably as low as I'll go, but I'll do a lot of repetitions. And in the process of doing the repetitions, you fatigue your muscles to the point that a heavier weight with less repetitions, a small number, you'll accomplish the same thing. But more importantly, when you are pumping the muscles, however you do it, even walking, jogging, riding a bike, whatever you choose to do, you're making your heart work, but not to an extreme, just to a healthy part, to an aerobic level that works. And that's something I encourage every single person to do. And if you don't have the physical ability, and I realize there are some people that just physically aren't able to do much after an aortic dissection, think about that too, folks. Also, think about the people who can't do what I can do, which is kind of embarrassing for me, but that's what I do. Many people can't do that.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, it's important I think, to have a mental challenge or a mental exercise on your cell phone. My wife has all kinds of games and any number of mind activities to keep her mind extremely sharp and alert, and it is. She's learned other languages. She's learned a lot of history about the United States. There's so many things that you can challenge yourself mentally if your body simply won't cooperate. My opinion, although I'm not a doctor, is from a physical standpoint, if you're able, lift weights, even if it's light, a lot of repetitions. Like I said, today was 600 for me before I came onto this program. And at the same time, if you're going to walk, walk, but increase it slowly and always be in touch with your doctor. These days, every clinic that I know has a portal where you can just contact a doctor and send them an email.
Mm-hmm.
I walked a mile today. I walked a mile and a half. I lifted 20 pounds for 30 repetitions. Whatever the exercise is, stay in contact with them or talk to the doctor's staff or nurse. So
Right
the
on.
idea that you can't do anything, in my opinion, is false. And my wife and I travel anywhere, and I'll be in the air as long as 5 hours. When we go to the Dominican Republic or any place else, when we were first told 1 hour, got to stay close to a hospital. And after 2 years, I said, and this is just my opinion, I'm not encouraging or discouraging. I just said, to heck with it. That's not life. That's just pure survival. And I want more than that. So we go whenever we can.
Okay, so Tammy Warner jumps in from our board. She says, "Great job, Scott. What is great is
Thank
your
you.
sharing your experience." Rob says, "I'll ask my cardiologist at my appointment this Friday. I'm still under a year from my dissection, so I imagine I'll get increased numbers." And that's another good question. How often is the designation of your weight limitations? Is that supposed to be for 18 months? Are you supposed to be able to increase that slowly but surely? These are good questions for your doctors. Kim K says, "Thank you. I just ordered your book, Lose Weight, Get Fit Easy." Thanks, Kim
Well,
K.
that's fantastic. Thank you. I didn't mention there's a free downloadable video that comes with that book. The hyperlink, the URL is inside the book. It's listed probably 10 times, and it has a visual downloadable video, which only takes about 15 minutes, not even that, 10 minutes to watch. It's an easy book to read, but more importantly, and I don't want this to be self-aggrandizing, it works. It works, and my heart is healthy. So at least I have something that I can do that I can still enjoy.
That's big. That's big. Okay, so real quick question here. We typically get some information about post-traumatic stress, and so my question to you is: did you feel anything like that after that? Was there any anxiety after the dissection other than, man, I just can't like lift weights, and that's where I want to be. That's what I want to do.
I don't think I would call it anxiety as much, but I can identify I felt totally lost for the
Okay.
longest time until I met John Jones, the president of the Packers, which was such a serendipitous type of an event that we met. So unlikely. That's one of those things you really wonder, is this divine intervention? Is there something else going on? Harmonic convergence, call it whatever you will. And for him to be so gracious to take me under his wing, because he was the only survivor that I had ever met, and I believe I was the same for him. We were 18 months apart. He was a marathon bicyclist. 2 days before his, he biked 75 miles. 2 days before mine, I ran 5 miles. So
Yeah.
we just hit it off and we're friends. He's a great individual. He's the architect, if I can plug John Jones for a minute, because
Sure.
did such a great job. If you're a Green Bay Packer fan or you know of them, Lambeau Field, where the Packers play today, as well as the surrounding area, which is known as the Titletown District, he was the architect of that. He was the visionary that had that idea. And he moved it, he became president, and shortly thereafter, he had an aortic dissection.
Mm.
But he and I had another thing in common. We're both type A semi-workaholics. Not a good thing to be.
Well, it depends. You never know.
Yeah.
Let's see here. So Kim K says, "Thank you. 5.5 year type B dissection." And then so sillingly, I was like, "How long ago, Kim?" She's like, 7/24/2017. And she says 5.5 years ago. Tammy says, "It's important for all survivors to understand that each person has their own story, exercise programs with limitations, and mental health journey." And she's right. It's different for everyone. Terry Cook, another board member, jumps in. Terry Cook says, "Great job, Scott. Everyone, please remember that Scott's weightlifting restrictions are unique to his experience. Please consult your physicians before starting any exercise programs. Thanks again. The board's doing what the board does." Remember to talk to your physician.
Yes, always.
Yeah.
You talk to them first, but eventually, ultimately, for me, after a few years, it's my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
I get as much information as I could, and I read when I showed my own books. That's my story,
Mhm.
but I got many other stories from many other resources, mainly off the internet. But there were books as well. And once I gleaned all of that, I thought, I'm going to try to do this and try to do that. And I did it slowly. And I would let my doctors, primarily my cardiologist, be aware
Yeah.
of what
Yeah.
I'm trying to do. And sometimes the eyebrows would go up and he'd be kind of worried about it. But then he'd say, Boy, you're really doing well. I
Right.
survived COVID and pneumonia 18 months ago, and I came within 1 day of being put on a ventilator and intubated, which would have probably been death again. The nephrologist that treated me for my dissection and got my blood pressure under control was also the hospitalist at St. Vincent Hospital again,
Mm-hmm.
2021. And he called my cardiologist, and I know these people well, kind of, as a patient, excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and anyway, we agreed that I'm going to stay in the hospital another day and then they'll put me on a ventilator. When I say we agreed, they agreed. My body just cooperated.
Nice.
And then I was released 2 days thereafter. So I've looked death in the face a couple times. I've never had the white light experience. A friend of mine from Huntington Beach, California, on this podcast, I hope, did. And I'm jealous of him because he had that white light
Mm,
experience and I did not.
interesting. Okay. What advice would you give to somebody who's been newly diagnosed or a new patient that's a new survivor?
A new survivor, take things very, very slow. Keep your expectations incredibly low. Do the littlest things. For me, what were the littlest things? If I could walk from my bedroom to the bathroom, which was about 15 feet, and go back and take a nap. Did that for about a week. And then I would venture downstairs, make one trip down the steps, one trip back up, lay down and take a nap. Happens all the time. And every day I would go, I shouldn't say every day I would add an extra couple of trips. So I'm making 5 or 6 trips a day, and they might be a grand total of 5 to 10, maybe 15 minutes, but build it very, very, very slow, just like a weightlifter would. You do it slowly. You don't impose too much right away because you're going to have a problem. But by taking it very, very slow from the very, very beginning, I really haven't had any further problems at all. And that's over 15 years. And my
Yeah.
residual dissection, as I think I said, is exactly the same, has not changed one bit.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember one of the reports I did a couple of years ago. They were talking about in the like way back 50s and 60s when they found an ascending aorta tear and they saw that there was a type B dissection. They would attempt to repair both, and they weren't getting a lot of success rates. There was a high fatality rate, and eventually they decided to repair the ascending because that was necessary, absolutely, and then to see if the type B would heal on its own and then go into a false lumen and then see just like monitor it and medically management from that point. And it was at that change that we saw a massive increase in the survivability of aortic dissections.
Okay.
Yeah. So when you say that, you still have this residual type B, and that I think that they knew about it and they were like, you know what, the right thing to do is to close this man up, medically manage this, and see if we have to do anything else. So that's very interesting.
Yeah, and the reason for it again is my body temperature had to be lowered to 60 degrees.
Hmm.
And once it's there, and they put you what's called a cooling blanket before the surgery is performed, so that once you're in that cooling blanket and you've hit 60 degrees, you got 30 minutes. Otherwise, you're going to hypothermia and probable death anyway.
Hmm.
So in 26 minutes, they got 2 out of the 3 danger zones corrected, but there just wasn't enough time, 4 minutes. So you're right. They closed me up and just said, we're going to take care of it with medication. But the medication has side effects I do not like, the biggest which is fatigue.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess we can. Oh, we do have one last shout out here. Rob, reminder: the Aorta Hangout this Thursday is at 2 p.m. Eastern. That's Eastern U.S. Come meet other survivors in a casual setting. You too, Scott. Scott, you're invited everywhere, by the way. You're always invited.
Thank you. Okay.
FJ says thank you. Um, Thank you, everyone. As we have done with Aortic Hope TV in the past, we're going to have a spotlight here for Scott when he talks about his book. We're going to go more in depth about the book. Karen will be interviewing him for that. He's got a second book, so there's a second one of those as well. So keep a lookout for those. We're building up your social media, I believe.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So keep a
Yes.
lookout here on this on the YouTube channel. Here, we'll get some of the new handles up in the description. Again, you can find his book. Thank you for ordering there, Kim K. Catherine
Thank you,
Norris
Kim.
says thank you so much. Very informative. Kim K says thank you. Timmy Warner says thanks, Scott. Big exclamation
Thank
part. Elkie
You're very
Carr,
welcome.
thanks so much. This was very interesting and informative.
Well, you folks are nice. I want to thank you for listening to a monologue. I over prepare, which I did tonight. Again, this is not interactive like I'm accustomed to speaking in front of an audience where I can walk around and get a feel for the group and take questions. This is not that way. I'm talking to a screen. I'm looking at Josh and he's making funny faces at me. So it is kind of fun, but it's different. But thank you for your patience.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Let's go ahead and let's say good night.
Okay. Good night, everybody. Thank you for attending. Let me know how I can help. Think aorta. Think family. Absolutely.